Let's start with the unusual and slowly work our way toward the downright absurd. Throughout history, people have worked jobs that sound more like the setup to a bad joke than actual employment. And yet, each one of these careers existed, and in some cases, even thrived. From medieval Europe to ancient China, these are the 10 weirdest jobs in history. Number 10. The knocker-up. Long before alarm clocks existed, people actually paid someone to knock on their windows and wake them up for work. In 19th century Britain and Ireland, the knocker-up would patrol the streets in the early morning, carrying long sticks, pebbles, or even pea shooters to tap on windows until their clients stirred. Imagine being shaken awake at 5 a.m. by some stranger poking your window with a stick. Worse yet, imagine if they overslept. Your entire day was ruined because the professional human alarm clock had a hangover. The job eventually died out with the invention of the mechanical alarm clock. But for decades, thousands of people relied on knockers up to keep their lives running on time. And to be honest, if I had one today, maybe I wouldn't hit snooze 12 times. Number 9. The Leech Collector. Back in the Middle Ages, medicine wasn't exactly advanced. People believed that sickness was caused by bad blood, and the cure was simple. Remove some of it. Enter the Leech Collector. These brave, or maybe just desperate workers waded into marshes and ponds with bare legs, waiting for leeches to latch on. Once enough were stuck, they'd peel them off, toss them in jars, and sell them to doctors for use in bloodletting. It sounds awful, but it was considered honorable work. Leeches were in such high demand that collectors sometimes had to let dozens suck them dry in a single outing. And while today the idea of bleeding someone to cure a cold sounds insane, leeches are actually still used in modern medicine for certain procedures. So maybe those swamp workers weren't as weird as we think, just very, very itchy. Number 8. The Gong Farmer. In Tudor England, someone had to deal with the waste from chamber pots and primitive toilets. That someone was the Gong Farmer. These poor souls worked at night, climbing down into cesspits to shovel out human waste, which was then carted away, often to be used as fertilizer. It was considered one of the most disgusting jobs imaginable. Gong farmers weren't allowed to work during the day because the stench was so overwhelming. Many died young from disease, suffocation, or simply falling into the pits they were supposed to clean. And yet, believe it or not, Gong farmers were actually well paid. After all, very few people were willing to spend their lives knee-deep in other people's filth. So in a way, they were the plumbers of the past, just without gloves, masks, or dignity. Number 7. The Sin Eater. In parts of Wales and England during the 17th and 18th centuries, families believed that when someone died, their sins could be transferred into food. The solution? Hire a sin eater. The ritual was simple but disturbing. A piece of bread and a bowl of ale were placed on the corpse's chest. A sin eater would consume them, symbolically absorbing all of the dead person's sins, allowing their soul to rest in peace. Sounds noble, right? Except sin eaters were social outcasts. No one wanted to touch them, talk to them, or even be near them, because everyone believed they were walking around carrying the sins of dozens of people. Imagine being shunned by society for doing your job too well. Today, the tradition is long gone, but the idea remains terrifying. The concept of literally eating someone's guilt for a paycheck. Number 6. The Plague Doctor. During the Black Death in the 14th century, Europe was desperate for solutions. Enter the Plague Doctor, the most ominous-looking professional in history. They wore long black robes, leather gloves, and the infamous beaked masks stuffed with herbs and flowers. Their job was to treat plague victims. But treat is a generous word. Most of their methods included bloodletting, burning herbs, or telling people to pray harder. In reality, plague doctors rarely saved lives. What they did manage to do was terrify everyone who saw them. Ironically, the costume that was meant to protect them probably did more good than their treatments. The leather and mask reduced exposure to fleas, which actually spread the plague. But the image of the plague doctor remains burned into history, a symbol of death, disease, and weird medical practices that were more nightmare than cure. In the 18th and 19th centuries, medical schools desperately needed cadavers for dissection and study. The problem? Bodies were in short supply, and grave robbing became the go-to solution. That's where resurrectionists came in. These professionals would dig up freshly buried corpses and sell them to universities for profit. Graveyards became battlegrounds, with families guarding tombs at night and inventing all kinds of security measures. Iron cages, booby traps, even coffin torpedoes that exploded if disturbed. For resurrectionists, it was dangerous work. If caught, they risked prison or violent mobs. But the pay was good, and medical schools looked the other way. Today we call this body trafficking. Back then, it was just another Tuesday night for a resurrectionist. Number 4. The Levitator Royal Food Taster. Being close to royalty came with perks, except when your job was to risk your life every meal. Royal food tasters, sometimes called levitators, in old texts, were employed to sample every dish before it reached the king or queen. The logic was simple. If the taster keeled over foaming at the mouth, the monarch would know not to take a bite. If the taster survived, dinner was safe. Simple, but terrifying. This wasn't a glamorous position. It was a death sentence disguised as employment. Some tasters lasted years, others only a few dinners. Imagine sitting down to every meal, knowing it might be your last bite of stew. Suddenly, that royal paycheck doesn't sound so great. Number 3. The Whipping Boy. Few jobs in history are as bizarre or unfair as the Whipping Boy. In 16th and 17th and century England, royal children were considered too sacred to punish directly. So when a young prince misbehaved, another child, the Whipping Boy, was punished in his place. The idea was that the prince would feel so guilty watching his innocent companion suffer that he'd behave better next time. Spoiler, it didn't always work. Some princes grew up spoiled, cruel, and completely unfazed by their friends' bruises. For the Whipping Boy, the job benefits included growing up in the royal court, receiving an education, and forming a close bond with the prince. The downside? Getting beaten for someone else's tantrums. Talk about taking one for the team. Number 2. The Groom of the Stool. At the height of the Tudor dynasty, one of the most prestigious jobs in the royal household was also one of the most humiliating. The Groom of the Stool. This man's duty was simple: assist the king with his bathroom needs. Yes, you heard that right. He managed a royal chamber pot, kept records of the king's bowel movements, and ensured his majesty was comfortable during the process. As degrading as it sounds, the position actually held enormous power. The Groom of the Stool had constant private access to the king, meaning he could influence decisions, pass along requests, and build political clout. Some even became trusted advisors. So while the job description was literally toilet assistant, the role carried influence most nobles would kill for. Proof that in politics, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you're close to the throne. Number 1. The Court Jester. Finally, at the very top of the list, we have the Court Jester, the professional fool. While today we think of jesters as comic relief, in medieval and Renaissance courts, their job was much stranger. Jesters weren't just entertainers, they were licensed truth-tellers. They could mock kings, insult nobles, and joke about politics without losing their heads, something no one else dared to do. Their bizarre costumes and antics disguised a deeper purpose to speak truths that others couldn't. But make no mistake, being a jester was terrifying. If a joke fell flat or an insult crossed the line, their royal protection could disappear instantly. Some jesters became legends, while others vanished without a trace. The weirdness lies in the duality. They were clowns, yet also advisors, fools, yet also prophets. It was a job that required wit, courage, and a willingness to risk death for a punchline.